but your kids are safe to go to school here. That's very important. I can walk into my kids' school and there's no security. There's no metal detectors. There are no kids here with clear book bags. Hey everyone, so today I'm going to talk about the Spanish education system and what our plans are for our kids, or how we're preparing them for the future in Spain or in the further EU. Now, the reason this came up is because I actually saw a question online, which I've gotten from multiple times from people in person and online, and I answered it. So I'm going to read that to you over here on my computer, and it says, question for parents with kids, especially teens. Are you worried about future job prospects for your child since you are raising them in a country with limited high-paying jobs? So that's the first part of the question, the main part of the question. And I have to stop there and say, I don't think that there are limited high-paying jobs here. I think it's just a matter of being educated and choosing the right field and being equipped with the right tools. There is a big stereotype in Spain about not being able to find work or not being able to get high-paying jobs, but I just don't think that that's true. If you'll go and look on Reddit, you'll find that there are certain fields where there are high-paying jobs and there are people making $4,000 to $6,000 a year living here who are Spanish. So the rest of the question says that it's really the main reason why we are waiting to move there. We want them in U.S. schools. That makes me pause. Why do you want your kids in U.S. schools? I don't get it. Like, the gun violence that is in the United States is the reason why I would never send my kids to school in the United States. Even if I moved back, they wouldn't go to school in the United States. I don't know how anyone actually sends their kids to school in the U.S. And these people are talking about how they have the option to come to Spain. Apparently, they don't because they want to have their kids in U.S. schools. It's like, the EU is a big place. Coming to Spain and being a resident here, or a long-term resident, or eventually a permanent resident or a citizen, honestly opens the door to so many opportunities for both you and your kids. So it just really shocks me that someone would say that they were delaying coming to Spain, or anywhere else for that matter, because of the U.S. education system. That's shocking. Okay, so going on to the rest of the question, because it's rather long. So they say they want them in the United States schools and eventually U.S. colleges, which in Spanish terminology, a college is a colegio, which is a school that kids go to when they're younger. But in U.S. terminology, a college is a university. So they're talking about keeping their kids in U.S. universities for connections. I don't really get that. I just think that it's such a narrow way of thinking. And once you move abroad, you will realize that there's other ways to get connections. I think that all of Spain, any city you live in, everything that you accomplish here gets done by knowing people. It's a very community-based society. And so I just kind of think, like, what do they mean connections? They need to U.S. universities in order to have connections for jobs. Like, it just shows that, like, people they have a very small, narrow way of thinking in the United States. You really need to leave the country so you can be exposed to more. Like, there's so much more out here. So anyway, continuing. U.S. universities for connections, since we anticipate the job market to be more challenging in the future, especially due to AI. Haven't we thought that the job market's going to be more challenging in the future? Like, always? There's always people thinking the economy is going to get worse. This is going to happen. This is going to crash. That's going to crash. The job market is going to be terrible. But, we're humans. And as a society, as a culture, well, we survive, right? We think things are not just totally collapsing. People adapt. People adapt what they're learning. Universities adapt what they're teaching. Okay, so their next question is, what are you doing to prepare your kids for the Spanish job market? And that is the main question that I want to answer. Okay, so first of all, I want to say this is a topic that I've given a lot of thought to and that I have implemented my own little plan. I've discussed it a little bit in the video about the Aragon economy and why, Aragon is a region in Spain with an economy that's growing faster than the Spanish average, and mainly heavily in the tech and maybe also related to manufacturing here. But there's going to be growth here right now. They're bringing in, there's growth with like Microsoft, Amazon, all types of tech jobs that are most likely going to come in here and set up shop. And so that's going to employ a lot of people in the tech world, right? So I also know from research that I've done on Reddit that people here in the tech industry tend to jump from job to job. They're able to do that easily and increase their income because the competition is not high. There aren't a lot of people here who are highly educated in that field. And so if you become highly educated in that field, it gives you the opportunity to be able to go from job to job and increase your pay every time. And this is not what I'm saying. This is what I've read on Reddit. So you can go and read it. That's just people's personal experiences. So the first thing that we're doing is we're having our kids learn a third language. Obviously, I'll take a step back. The first thing we're doing is putting them in Spanish schools because they didn't learn Spanish. They didn't learn Spanish very well in the English-speaking schools. So we put them into Spanish schools, which immediately their Spanish grew. Not only do they get the language, but more importantly, they're learning how the system works in Spain. They're learning how the teachers teach. They're learning what the workload is like. Okay, they're adapting to the way things are done here. When you go to school in the United States, and that kind of flows into schools in the university, and you already know what the culture of education is like. Well, when you haven't gone to school here and you just go right to the university system, it might be difficult. I don't know, but I'm assuming that it is. So I thought it best that our kids go into the Spanish school system so that they would learn the system here so that they could flow right into a university in Spain. Now, I also want them, obviously, in order to go to school in Spain, in order to go to a university, affordable universities here, they need to speak Spanish well. They need to be able to write in Spanish well. So obviously, that's another benefit of our kids going into Spanish school. Not just the language, verbal language, but written language, the grammar, the study of the language. Here they call it lengua. And then so most of the schools are also teaching English as a second language, but my kids don't need that. They already have English. So for us, we consider Spanish and English to be kind of like their first languages, and then we want them to have a second language. So their second language, we gave our kids the choice between French and German. Many of the schools here are already teaching French. And with a little bit of research, I decided that German was actually the more important language. So with that information, I encourage them to choose German. So what one of them is doing now, and the other one will do eventually, is they take classes on OutSchool in German. They take German language classes. In the past, my kids have taken French through OutSchool. They've taken Spanish through OutSchool. They've taken science classes through OutSchool, drawing classes through OutSchool. There's all kinds of things on OutSchool. It's just a website where teachers come and they teach your kids in group classes, and they can be live or pre-recorded. So my kids have had a good experience with OutSchool, and because of that, we're using it to learn German. There are opportunities to study German in a school here. There's opportunities here to go to actual German classes in person, but they didn't like that. It wasn't engaging enough for them. So it's good for them to be able to take the class online at home for like 45 minutes to an hour once a week. That's how my one son is doing it. There are many other classes on there. You can choose whatever schedule you want with whoever you want, but that's how they're doing it. Okay, so he's currently in the third level of German. So that's our second thing. Okay, the first thing was going to Spanish school. Second thing is learning German. The third thing is that I think it's really important to get citizenship, especially for your kids' future. Maybe you yourself don't want citizenship. Right now, citizenship in Spain is not on my radar personally, but I see it as a big benefit for my kids. And that's because I want them to be able to go to university outside of Spain if they want to. What if a degree that they want is not available in Spain? What if they decide that they're more comfortable studying in English? What if they decide that they want the challenge of going to university in Germany and learning the German culture and having those job prospects and becoming becoming highly proficient in the German language, more so than they already will be. Okay, what if they want to do that? They can easily do that if they have citizenship in Spain. No. Okay, so I'm going to now talk to you about the Spanish school system and how it differs, or just to show an explanation of how it works. I don't know if I'll really be that good at telling you how it differs, but you can figure out how it differs from your country based on what I'm going to show you. So I will put this PDF in the description below, and you can thank me by leaving a comment, a like, or subscribing to this channel, The Burgos Experience. By the way, that's my last name. That's my husband's last name, and that's why we have that name in our channel. It's not because we live in Burgos. We live in Zaragoza. That's just a side note. Okay. So the way this works is, culturally, many people send their kids to school like at 1, okay? I think it's trending more now, if you can, to keep your kids home until they're 3. People who can afford to do that are doing that. People are still sending their kids to school earlier than what I typically would do, which is 3 years old. That's also earlier than what some people will do in the United States. The legal requirement for kids being in school here is 6 to 16. Okay, so on this PDF, you're going to see, hopefully you can read this, that preschool. So preschool is, even though it says like 1 year old, this is the first cycle of preschool, which is guarderia. And then you have the second cycle of preschool, which is infantil. And that is 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and 5-year-olds. So they're still in infantil or preschool in Spain when they're 5. Even when they turn 6, they're still in infantil. They're in infantil tercera, which is the 3rd level of infantil. I have a 5-year-old who will be 6 next year, who is in the 3rd level of infantil, which is the equivalent of kindergarten in the United States, but he's not in kindergarten, and they don't even have that name. Okay, he has 1 class. There are 2 or 3 age groups represented in the class, and that's what he's been in for the last 3 years. We have preschool right here, which it says it starts at 1. The first level, the first cycle of preschool is for 1-year-olds and 2-year-olds. It's called guarderia, okay? And then the second cycle is called infantil. You have infantil primera, segunda, y tercera. So that is for 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and 5-year-olds. Okay, so they don't actually have anything called kindergarten here. They have infantil. So I have a 5-year-old who will be 6 next year, and he is still in infantil, still in what's considered the preschool levels here. He will not have kindergarten. He's in the equivalent of what's considered kindergarten in the United States, but it's not considered kindergarten here. So he goes to school with, kids start in the infantil primera, they start at 2 years old. You begin school here based on your birth year, from January to December, not based on like when's your birthday on August 1st or when's your birthday on September 1st, or how old are you on August 1st or how old are you on September 1st. No, it's about what year were you born, exclusively what year were you born, regardless of what month, from January to December. So in his class, he could have 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, and maybe possibly even like a 4-year-old who hasn't quite turned 5 yet. Depends on the school. Sometimes the school has the groups mixed. Like our school has the group mixed, so he has actually 2, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds in his class. And after January, those 5-year-olds will start turning 6. So then after January, there's going to be 3, 4, 5, and 6-year-olds in the same class. So it just depends. But you can see, if you sit down and do the math, you might find that your kids may go into a different grade in Spain than what they are in the United States. So now, after this infantil, you get primaria, which thankfully this is actually written in English, so that's good for some of you, okay? And the first cycle is the equivalent of the first grade and the second grade, and then they go into the second cycle of primaria, of primary school, and that's 3rd and 4th grade, and then the third cycle, 5th and 6th grade, and then they start ESO, ESO, okay, Education Secondary Obligatory, Educación Secundaria Obligatoria, are those with A's? Obligatoria. Someone can leave a comment and let me know, because it's written in English, so I can't say, but anyhow, it's called ESO. You will hear people referring to it here as ESO. And ESO is the equivalent of 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grades. So it's a mix of what we would call part of middle school and part of high school. When you're in the 6th grade here, you're still in primary school. Kids don't start school here, kids don't start middle school here until the equivalent of 7th grade. So 6th graders are still in what's considered primary school, which I absolutely love. It's not pushing them to grow up too soon. So primary school, 6th grade, and then they go into ESO. There are different types of schools here. Sometimes you'll find schools that have primary and ESO combined. Other times you'll have to switch you'll go send your kids to a school that's only primary and also will include infantil and guarderia. But then when they get into 7th grade, they have to go into ESO. They have to go into a different school. And then there are some schools, most concertados are like this, where they have infantil, primaria, y ESO, all together. So your kid could go to school from 3 years old all the way to 16 at the same place. And sometimes they even have a guarderia there, which means the babies can go to school from 1 and at the same school until they're 16, finishing the 4th level of ESO, or the equivalent of the 10th grade in Spain. Okay, so what I want to show you is another benefit of the Spanish school system, in my opinion anyways. Once they turn 16, they can actually leave. They can leave school and go into the job market at the equivalent of 10th grade. And they do that by entering into what we would call vocational schools in the United States. They have a different name here. I think it's like formación or something like that. But anyhow, they can go into the equivalent of tech schools and get a vocational degree. And then if you just follow the flow chart here, from the vocational degree, they can go into the labor market, or they can just come out and start working and enter the labor market. Right here is the vocational training to be a tech. From technician level jobs, you can go up into high technician vocational jobs. And then you can also enter the vocational field after you've done baccalaureate. How do you say this? Baccalaureate. It's basically the same as 11th and 12th grade in the United States. Okay, so I've checked with the Spanish speaker in the house, and he says that it's bachillerato. Okay, it looks like bachelorette. It also looks like baccalaureate. But what it is it's the last 2 years of the equivalent of high school in the United States. So 11th and 12th grade. If you have a student who wants to go to university, they're going to go into here. They're not going to stop school at the 10th grade. They're going to go into the last 2 years of university, last 2 years of high school, and this is where they prepare for university. And then still, they can leave and go and get their higher level tech vocational certification, and still they could enter the labor market. Okay, it's not like you have to go all the way through to university. There's so many points here where you're going into the labor market, as you can see. And there's also points where, this little oval, yellow oval, is an entry test. Spain loves their testing. And so there's a test to leave bachillerato and go to university. There's a test to go from a tech vocational training at 16 and to go into high vocational training. There's a test. If you're in the labor market and because you left early and you decided to go directly to the labor market and you want to come back and to go to tech school, there's a test. There's a test to go to the higher level of tech school. But the point is that there are so many options. And I don't know, you tell me, it's a big country, so I don't know what else offered in the United States. I've never had my kids in school there. I don't know really anything about the education system there anymore since I graduated like too long ago. So when I was in school, we did have tech school, but I know there's been a lot of complaints about not having tech options in the United States. So to me, this is actually a better scenario where your kids have so many options for when they can leave school. They can go and get, like, I believe there's something the equivalent here of a GED, so then they could finish and they get a certificate for finishing secondary. And with that, they can go get a job. It would be a basic job, but still they could work from 16 and then they can come back into school, or maybe they do like a combo, or they go and they get a tech degree instead of going to these last 2 years, or get a higher tech degree instead of going to these last 2 years, or they go to the last 2 years and they go to university. So, and at this point, they also would have the choice of going to university in other countries. And then furthermore, within the EU, there's a program called Erasmus. And when you go to university in an EU country school, I think it's all of the EU, but I might be wrong. This is something someone who knows more than me is going to have to add on to this in the comments. And by the way, I thank you for doing that. You all are so helpful. The people who are Spanish, who are from here, and who leave their amazing, informative comments. It really helps me a lot, and it helps me to share more information with other people. So Erasmus is where anyone who's going to university here in the EU, I don't know if you need residency or citizenship or what, but you can do a semester abroad. It's like going abroad within the EU. So my kids could take a semester and go to Germany, take a semester and go to Ireland, take a semester and go to Denmark. They could go any of these countries, and at the same time, those students can come here to Spain, and they often do, because when I've gone into the Spanish classes here at the academies, they have people there who are Erasmus students who are going to university for a semester, and they come in and they take a couple weeks of classes of Spanish along with taking their Erasmus semester in Spanish. So it's kind of tough for them, but it's an experience. They get to experience a different culture, sharpen up their Spanish skills, or maybe learn them fresh. And so all of this was to say that I think that this question that I started with about, are you worried about the jobs in Spain? I think it comes from a good place, but it comes from a place of lack of information. So really, if you find out how the system works here, and not only how it works, but your kids are safe to go to school here, that's very important. I can walk into my kids' school and there's no security. There's no metal detectors. There are no kids here with clear book bags, but your kids are safe to go to school here. That's very important. I can walk into my kids' school and there's no security. There's no metal detectors. There are no kids here with clear book bags. No one uses clear purses. No one is using a book bag with a bulletproof shield on it. This is not, oh, cool new technology in Spain that is necessary, because it's not necessary. I've never even heard of it existing here. It doesn't happen. The biggest culture shock for me with schools is that kids pull their book bags on wheels. I mean, that's it. They walk alone to school sometimes. They go on the bus alone. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, I just cannot compare the schooling here to the United States without saying that it is 1,000% better, just the environment of it. And then the opportunities also, and the fact that you have the whole EU to go to university. You don't only have to go to university in Spain. You can go to university in other countries, more languages. And my tips are, bring your kids, put them in Spanish schools, whether it's private, public, concertado, but put them in Spanish schools so they can learn the language, learn the culture, learn the terminologies, become really ingrained in the culture. Even their body language changes. I mean, they become what's around them, right? So you want to have them in a good school with good kids. And then add a language, English, Spanish, German. That's my suggestion. Now, if your kids are totally against German, then fine, teach them French. That's the next closest country. But I do German because Ireland and Germany are the two strongest economies in the EU. So my kids already know English. They need to learn German. That way, they will be able to work for the two strongest countries in the EU, or they'll be able to work in the two strongest countries in the EU. Now, you add in the fact that they'll be Spanish citizens, so they also have the opportunity to work in Spain. You add in the fact that my kids are also American citizens, so they can work in the United States, or they can work abroad remotely from any of these countries that they might want to live in and earn an American income, US dollars. It's not just about earning the US dollars, it's about the higher rate of pay that you get for the work there. You do the same job here and make less. So that's a benefit for them, and it would be a benefit for any kid who came over here and had a US passport to any country in the EU. Really, any country, anywhere besides maybe Iceland, Australia, New Zealand, those types of countries are going to be very expensive to live in. Ireland is very expensive to live in, but still higher wages if they're coming from the US, but Ireland has higher wages on its own compared to the rest of the EU. What else? I can't think of anything else right now to add to this. So you can leave your comments, and then I'll come back with another video if I think it kind of, if I'm inspired again to like answer a question in more detail. But anyhow, I would really challenge you to question your perspective on what you consider to be a country with an inadequate job market, or that you're stifling your children's opportunities by moving to Spain, because I do not think that you are.